President Cyril Ramaphosa says government has decided to establish a climate change response fund. Now this in order to counter the severe effect of global warming. The establishment of the fund comes soon after the passing of the climate change bill last year. Joining us now is Dr Nomhle Ngwenya, independent climate finance researcher and specialist. Dr. Ngwenya, a very good afternoon and thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
How important was this announcement made by the president last night?
This comes at a very crucial time, where our country has really just witnessed, the impacts of extreme weather events and its impacts on society and the economy. Almost no province has been untouched, by the impacts of climate change and extreme weather events. And I think the president wonderfully encapsulated this in his SONA address yesterday, where, he mentioned the wildfires in the Western Cape, the floods in KwaZulu-Natal, unbearable, heat waves in Northern Cape and Eastern Cape, and, sporadic rainfall that has caused flooding as well in Gauteng. So there is a myriad of, challenges that are experienced by climate change, and a climate response fund, is really needed to address these challenges that we are currently facing.
What sort of a difference are we expecting this fund to make? Because at the end of the day, one would say, but these are natural disasters. We can't control them, Dr. Ngwenya.
Mm-hmm. So the interesting thing about this fund is one of the main things that the president mentioned is this is going to be a partnership between, government and the private sector. And really, these are the sort of collaborations that we really, really need because government, and the private sector have really, really witnessed, the impacts of these extreme related weather events. If we just even look at an economic level where we're seeing, how infrastructure has been, disrupted. We saw how in the KZN floods, we saw how Transnet, came to a halt and goods and services were disrupted. So this just really highlights how extreme weather events really need, inter and cross collaboration between the private sector and government, as this is definitely clearly having, visible impacts, not just only on society, but on our economy as well.
I mean, speaking of the issues of infrastructure and is this then about this fund maybe touching on issues like making sure that the infrastructure that we have can withstand these natural disasters that seem to be coming way too often?
Correct. So one of the main things that we are, especially as scientists, that we are really looking forward to, getting more, detail with regards to the Climate Response Fund is looking at things such as climate resilient infrastructure. It's very clear that when a flood occurs, the main impact is on infrastructure, your ports, your roads, your schools. And so it really is, incumbent upon us as a country to start investing in climate resilient infrastructure. So this is where we start speaking around the mitigation. It's very clear that these, extreme weather events, are not going anywhere. Instead, they're going to become more, intensified. And it's very important that, whilst we are addressing our infrastructure issues, that we make sure that there is a climate component too. But secondly, what we are also expecting from this response fund is massive investment in research and development. So if we look at things like early monitoring systems, this is really where we're using climate and scientific data to make informed decisions. How do we ensure that we are well prepared in advance, to track, weather phenomena such as El Nino, to track sporadic rainfall, so that businesses and communities can be well prepared when a drought or a wildfire or a heat wave occurs.
Now, at a municipal level, and maybe a bit of a political question here, but is enough being done to mitigate some of those losses of climate change and these hazardous events?
This is such an interesting question because national and municipal levels, we have, very wonderful documents and policies that really speak around addressing climate change, and the challenge really then becomes, implementation. And I think this is why I was quite impressed also with the private sector being roped in, because this is really where they will assist government with the implementation parts, such as, mobilizing capital. But a key challenge, that is facing, municipal level is skills, right? So if we are looking at, extreme related weather events, how do we ensure that we have the right people employed who are going to be able to, to develop adaptation and mitigation strategies that are effective and that can be implemented, immediately? So these are skills around, infrastructure development combined with climate change, etc. So skills development really is a challenge, and that's something that's not being highlighted. So with the Climate Response Fund, one of the things that really needs to be, geared about is how do we ensure that, at municipal level and at national level, we have, the right employees who've got the right skills, who are able to ensure that effective policies and strategies are implemented to deal with extreme weather-related events, especially because it's so cross-cutting and it affects every, facet of our society and our economy.
Dr. Ngwenya, you spoke about monitoring systems, and one asks that, do we have those systems? And how adequate or accurate are they? If you look internationally, you would always see in the news talking about a tsunami warning, an early tsunami warning, that residents have been advised to evacuate or take higher ground and so on and so forth. But in South Africa, do we have such systems, or is it where this sort of fund will then plug those holes?
So, we can always, I think, enhance our system. So if we look at the South African Weather Services, I think they are fantastic in terms of releasing timely weather data that we can use. It is just a matter of how do we use that data, to make, innovative solutions in advance. And this is where things like technology becomes very important. The use of AI, to make those, faster projections. And this has been applied, if you look globally, with the European Union Disaster Fund, they've really made use of artificial intelligence, backed by, your weather and science data in order to make informed decisions, and also to warn, various countries which are on the radar, for extreme weather events, such as floods or droughts. So this is really a combination that we could really just, include. Technology is very crucial in making such projections, and we can definitely enhance on that.
Do we, and I think maybe a question of educating people, Dr. Ngwenya, do people take cognizance of such warnings? I mean, naturally, I would get a message on my phone that says severe thunderstorms warning in Johannesburg from this time to this time. If you get it from your insurance, they would say, please park your car in a safe place or something to that effect. But that's a message that is not available to everyone. But also the question of whether people actually heed these calls in terms of their accuracy.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to answer this question in two sets. And the first part is, I think we are all seeing how if climate change has a direct impact on you, you will definitely take heed, to all the weather warnings. For example, last year we saw how various hailstorms impacted a lot of people, and how cars were damaged, and people's homes and windows were damaged, mm-hmm. And how insurance claims, shot through the roof, even during the KZN floods that have occurred. So if it has a direct impact on you, I think you would definitely be more inclined to pay more attention, to weather changes and to all these alerts that you spoke about. But secondly, yes, you are correct. There is a lack of understanding of not even just extreme weather events, but of climate change as a whole, right? If you are, living, you are in a disadvantaged area, and you're living by a riverbank, and, if officials do tell you to move across, how are we ensuring that, disadvantaged people and marginalized people who are living across riverbanks have access to safe housing and secure housing? So it really is also a conversation around privilege, right? If you are, have a digital phone and you have access to weather data, you're more likely to act on it and make more informed choices around where to park your car, where to go, etc. If you are, marginalized and you are on a riverbank and you're told to pack your bags, the likelihood of that happening is not, because that is your livelihood. That is where you are. So definitely government really needs to ensure that as much as we educate people, we also find alternative solutions for them, such as secure, safe housing, and breaking down scientific technical terms, so that anyone is able to understand that if we mean extreme weather-related events, such as a flood, such as a drought, what do we mean and what actions can you take to stay safe as well?
How urgent then, Dr. Ngwenya, is it that we need to deal with these issues of climate change?
Mm-hmm. So climate change is becoming much more intense and frequent, and it's also becoming very much unpredictable. So it is very, very urgent, especially as a developing country rather. And we are, Southern Africa is very much vulnerable to climate change. Unfortunately, we are going to face, some of the most, horrible consequences of climate change if we do not adapt at the moment and we do not mitigate. Yesterday, President Ramaphosa mentioned in his SONA speech that part of, the climate, response fund is really ensuring that, South Africa is climate proof for the future. And what that really means is that we really need to make the necessary investments, the necessary partnerships as well, and to create innovative solutions so that, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, we are able to mitigate and adapt to the effects of climate change. Climate change is not going anywhere. As I mentioned, it's going to become much more intense and frequent. All the extreme-related weather events that we are having is expected to multiply. So we really need to act fast and urgently, and really put aside political differences and collaborate with the private sector, collaborate with NGOs and communities as well, and build up on those strong partnerships so that we are able to adequately, adapt, to some of the effects of climate change.
Well, Dr. Ngwenya, if last night's thunderstorms are anything to go by here in the Johannesburg area, then we need to do something absolutely urgent around this. So thank you so much for coming through to speak to us. Appreciate your time and your insights.